So, Martine Wright, MBE, you are a survivor of the 7/7 bombings, a Paralympian, a skydiver with a pilot's license, a partner and a mother, and an outstandingly Schutzfrau woman.
God bless you.
And so I am thrilled to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Julia.
And my first question to all our guests is, what is a particular challenge you are facing or have faced?
Well, I've faced a few challenges, like all of us have in life. That's what happens. I mean, I think that's what life is about. I suppose there was one big challenge that I can't quite believe happened nearly 20 years ago. Next year will be the 20th anniversary of the 7/7 bombings, in 2005. And that was a shocker, Julia. That was me. The timings of it all were, well, I think this is why I've always said I was always meant to make this journey, because the timings and the coincidences, all about it, says that I'm supposed to be literally talking to you today about what I've done over the last 19 years. Because the day before the London bombings happened was the day that some of us might remember. That was the day that London had won the Olympic and Paralympic bid.
Huge
I'm a Londoner. I might have my posh voice on at the moment, Julia, but I am a Bovell Cockney. I was born in the city of London, and I was very excited at work that the Paralympics, not necessarily Paralympics, because that wasn't on my radar at that time, but the Olympics were coming. Went out that night, had lots of celebratory drinks, looking forward to the Paralympics, and literally got up the next morning. Everyone has a story that morning, I believe. Like, everyone has a story when they're involved in anything, well, especially terrorism, because I think it's so shocking.
Just to pause you, that the sort of what ifs, isn't it, that the moments before, the sliding door moments, those are the things that you can go over and over again.
Exactly. And I'm not saying that I didn't do that. There was times in hospital that probably talk about that I couldn't get out of my head. Why me?
Yeah.
Why me?
Yeah.
Out of the millions of people that travel on the London transport network, why me? I actually think I'm quite a nice person. But this is where
why do bad things happen to good people? It makes no sense.
Of course.
And to a young woman.
And it's the way you use it as well. I know that's very easy for me to say 19 years on, but I believe things happen to us and we need to use them and learn from them. So, but this was a bit of a big learning curve, because I got on the tube that morning. I was late, like many people. I hit my snooze button, jumped on that tube, and literally the last thing, got to Moorgate and saw the tube and thought, what result? I haven't got to wait. And jumped on and started reading my paper that morning. Now, you couldn't read a paper that morning without reading something on the Olympics and Paralympics. And I remember going into that tunnel before the explosion happened, and I remember thinking, I've got to get tickets to this. I'm a Londoner. I've got to get tickets to this. And then the explosion happened. And why do I think that I was supposed to do this journey? Because 7 years later, which is now my lucky number, people think I'm slightly off my rocker to have 7/7 as my lucky number, but I didn't need a ticket. I took part within the Paralympics. And to me, that tells me that I was always meant to make that journey.
Extraordinary. So for people who don't know you, do you want to fill in the gap? So the bomb went off in the tunnel.
Yeah.
And what happened to you, Martine?
Yeah, so as I said, we went into this tunnel after Liverpool Street, and all I can describe it as is a white flash. I have many friends now that were involved that day, and they remember a big bang. I don't remember a bang, I remember a flash, and I remember being thrown from side to side. And it was weird because I had enough time to think, what is going on? And I can't believe I saw this flash and saw that in a nanosecond that it must have gone off. Anyway, it went off, and then I can only describe, we were sitting somewhere that didn't look like a tube. I mean, you couldn't see anything. My initial reaction, like many people that day, was, we've had a crash. I don't think it was terrorism. We've had a crash. Yeah. We've had a crash. And then I was the most injured survivor that day because my legs got caught up. I was quite slight. I was quite small. I've got bigger now because I need my arms, my strong arms. But I was thrown around and my legs got caught in the end of the tube. And a lot of the time people see in the press a picture of a tube with a huge hole in the side of it. That was our tube. And that was where I was sitting.
You were bang in the middle of it. I mean, you were at the epicenter.
And I was down there for an hour and a quarter, but I would not be here today if it wasn't for the amazing bravery of people that day, and the policeman. I've had the honour of meeting the policeman, the fireman that cut me out, and Liz, my guardian angel, who is my lovely, lovely, beautiful lady that is an off-duty policewoman on that day. He knew immediately. Apparently she wasn't in the carriage that I was in, but she made her way, like many people that day, towards danger. And she gave me 2 tourniquets to put around my legs, because my leg, all I can describe is I had new trainers that day. It was July. It was summer. I had new white trainers. And I remember when the smoke cleared and the screams had subsided and you could see
Martine.
what was... I looked up and I saw my trainer. I was down here. My trainer was up there about 6 foot.
Oh my God.
I'm only 5'2", and it was covered in blood. And I know apparently I lost 80% of my blood. I don't know how anyone could lose 80% of my blood, but if Liz Kenworthy was not there, my guardian angel, and gave me 2 tourniquets to put around my legs, which I felt like I was on watching John Wayne on my sofa with my dad on a Sunday afternoon. It's the only time I've ever seen tourniquets used when someone gets shot. It's surreal. And then I woke up 8 days later and found out that both my legs had been amputated above the knee, that I was the most injured survivor and been resuscitated several times and been put in a coma.
I'm so interested the way you kind of describe it as, I mean, I can hear even 19 years later, I mean, obviously, despite it being 19 years later, there's a sort of emotion in your voice, particularly when you think of Liz. It's something about the kindness of others, that she walked in the way of danger to save you. So you didn't sound so emotional when you saw your new trainers 8 foot above you. It was someone saved your life and tied a tourniquet around your legs. But also you frame it as it was meant to happen rather than I'm a victim. I don't know how, I mean, talk to both.
To how, yeah. I mean, I woke up after 8 days and I couldn't believe I was a double amputee above the knee. It looked like I was going to lose my left arm as well at that point, but thankfully my surgeon saved it. She didn't meet the Queen. She was better to meet the Queen, but she saved my arm, she said. And because the Queen visited. And yeah, it's about that thing of waking up and in disbelief and going, why me? What have I done? And people coming out of that coma, whether it was my family, my mum, dad, sister, all of them, brother, it's the people that got me through. And this is, you picked up on it already, Julia, that it happens, that happens. And I don't think, I imagine part of my journey is as a result of maybe my resilience and maybe my glass half full rather than glass empty that I've always had. But
you think you were born with that? Because we'd all like it.
Yeah. Well, people tell me that. My friends, my family say that I've always been an optimist. And this is where the power comes from other people and the strength of other people. And the big question people ask me is, what was the turning point? What was really that got you through? And I don't think it was down to me. I think it was down to people around me and the belief that they had in me. And for instance, I speak about what people said to me. So when I came out of that coma and I kept going, I've got no legs, I can't carry on, I've got no legs. And I remember my mum grabbed hold of my face and she looked into my eyes and she said, but Martine, you are still here. And you are still Martine. And there are 52 people that are not here. And you're going to get new legs and you're going to do it. Or whether it was my brother coming to me, crying, and I do joke and say there was quite a lot of people crying around my bedside at that point.
Yeah.
But he came to me and he said, Martine, I've had an awful thought. And I said, what have you had? And he said, I can't tell you. I feel so guilty. And I said, tell me. And he said, basically, out of 3 siblings, so I've got an older sister, Tracy, who's 10 years older than me, and Grant, who is 7 years older than me. He said, I had a thought, and I think out of 3 of us, you have been chosen because you're the strongest out of 3 of us. And I don't think me or Tracy would be able to deal with this. And that belief, that it's the people that have got
He
me through.
imbued it in you in some way. Saying it to you
I
helped you
mean,
believe it in yourself.
yeah, and the strength of that, and that's why I think that day, awful day, absolutely awful day. But it was a day of a scale of humanity, from the most selfish acts that you could ever do, to the most selfless act, running towards that danger. I mean, I've met so many people now that obviously were involved that day or have memories, or painful memories from that day. And that's why also I think I've always meant to make this journey, because I've met so many people. And obviously people want to talk about it with me, because that's what I do now. I'm an inspirational speaker, and I go off and talk about how we can get through things and try and help people. Because if I can help one person out there to get through something huge, then all the pain has been worth it. But it's the people I've met as well, and the coincidences. So, for instance, a couple of months ago, I was at a job, and one week I met this lady that basically came up to me, and she said, Martine, you just done a great talk. You speak about that resilience. You had that resilience that day. And I went, oh, I'm sure I did. And she went, no, darling, I held her hand. Can't remember her. Sorry? I was outside Aldgate, and I'm medically trained, and I was walking past, and you were being brought out. Well, you wasn't being brought out at that point. The firemen were talking about you. And the firemen were saying, there's a lady down there. She's trapped. She's the only one left. We need to get her out. They didn't know whether there were any secondary devices going to go off or anything. And she held my hand. She came out. And again, that belief, she went, darling, you had that belief that day. Those firemen knew there was something about you. And then the next week, I meet a couple of guys, IT professionals, who were going to get an arranged marriage with the bomber's family, one of the bomber's families, and they didn't realise. And they went to their friends of friends to see these two daughters, these two brothers were going to maybe marry. And they said, oh, haven't you got a son as well? And the family in Birmingham, they said, no, he was one of the 4 correspondents. And again, I don't know. People ask me, do you feel that anger? And my God, these people this family have been completely disassociated from the whole community as a result of what their son done. Yeah, they're
And
here.
he
They're living
died.
it. They're living it. Yeah, he blew up and left his family behind. And now they're banished from their community,
society.
this and that. But what I'm saying is it's about people, and it's about the people I meet now. I'm just hugely honoured about what people share with me. And I suppose every time I meet one of those people, it says to me that, Julia, if you gave me a time machine, I won't go back, because my life now is so enriched with the people and the experiences and what I've learned.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, that you would never, there you were, innocent, if you like, the day before, going about your life, optimistic, and somehow the sense you've made of it is that such a devastating thing would happen to you. And how many people were killed?
52. There were
52.
many people injured, yeah, but 52 people were killed, yeah.
And that it's kind of opened a new version of you to you, hasn't it? That has given you meaning and a richness.
Yeah.
Because the depth of their experience and the depth of people's response to you is so much greater than if something like this hadn't happened to you. So people see you and they don't do any kind of performative, boring things. They go straight to the heart of the matter.
You're right. Because again, I mean, I feel so honoured that it's some of these, when I go and talk to 300 people, or you might have those people in the audience that want to put their hand up, but then you want those people come to you after. And I always make sure to my clients to say, you need a coffee break, because there will be people that I have hit something somewhere. Because I do say, I'm not the only person. Julia, I know you've been through stuff. I know that everyone in that room would have been through something traumatic, or know of a loved one that has been through something like that.
You can't live and not be touched.
No. And one of my mantras is, there's no utopia out there, and there's no destination. It's like the journey, where we are, how we live our life is the destination. That's it. And it's what we experience and the people we meet from it. But no, you're right. I mean, as I said, there's some people like to put up their hand. If there's some people that come to me after and they're crying, and all I want to do is give them a cuddle, first of all. And then we have a chat about whatever. And I just think, like, I'm just so honoured that you've shared something that maybe your work colleagues don't even know. Maybe your family don't even know.
Something very intimate.
Yeah.
And meaningful.
And the power, yeah. And what that gives me is...
the richness.
Fills me up. It fills me up.
Yeah.
You know?
So I can see you really taking it in.
I
It's like you grew as you remember those people coming up to you. It's like it internally. You may be sitting in a wheelchair now and not be able to use your legs, but their heart and their openness somehow, you grow from it and you kind of feel bigger. But can we go back to the people listening who they're not 19 years on, but they may be at the beginning of a crisis? Were there worst moments that you kind of look back and you think, that was so bad. That was the worst of the worst.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when I woke up out of my coma, so interestingly enough, with the friends that I'd met that day, and this is the 7-7 Club that we call it, a club that you would never ever choose
to be a member
to be part of.
Yeah.
But it's the most amazing club in the world. So you walk into a room, you don't have to say anything. You just look into each other's eyes, that understanding.
There's a depth of experience, a depth of understanding.
It's just unbelievable, the power of once we all get in a room. Because the worst day, people say to me that were involved that day, that they had a time in that tunnel, on that tube, when it had happened. They said goodbye because they thought they were going to die. I never, ever thought I was going to die down there, even though, I mean, I was saying to Liz Kenworthy, the lady that gave me my tourniquets, my name is Martine Wright. Please tell my mum and dad I'm okay. My name is Martine Wright. Please tell my mum and dad I'm okay. I wasn't all right. I was the most injured survivor that day. But I never had that down there in the tunnel. I never, ever thought I was going to die. But where I did think I was going to die was the day after I got told that I'd lost my legs. And that was the day that I was conscious for the first time in intensive care. And I was too scared to sleep. I wouldn't sleep because I thought I wasn't going to wake up. And all my family and the NHS staff were saying, ironically, you wouldn't have woken up 9 days ago, but now you're fine, sort of thing. But I remember that day, I mean, I was so convinced that I was going to die that I asked for a pen and paper off the nurse. I couldn't write but I started writing where I wanted my ashes scattered in Koh Phangan, in Thailand, in a beach in Thailand.
Your favourite place in the world?
Yes, my favourite place in the world. So I look back on that day and maybe again, I think maybe I needed that release or something because I never felt that anger towards the bombers. I felt anger towards the government and the way that they were treating victims and the CICA. But I never ever felt that anger. And I don't know. I think I needed that day. My brain and my body needed that day to maybe feel like I was going to die because I think that would be a natural thing to feel. And then I think maybe I felt that day. And then after that, it was like that because it wasn't. But
no, it's up and down.
My body and brain
straight.
needed that release, I believe, in order to then go, because the body and the mind is an amazing, amazing thing. I mean, even down to, I met the fireman that cut me out and that saved my life. And they said, Martine, have you seen this? And I said, what's that? And they said, look, there's a scar that you left on my hand. And they went, you were screaming. You were absolutely screaming with pain. And I said, no, I wasn't. I thought I was, the paramedic gave me, you weren't unconscious, Martine. You were conscious and you were screaming. And I remember everything that day down there, except that. And my brain must have gone, that's enough.
Not remembering.
That is enough for Martine. Isn't that, I mean, it's amazing, amazing. So I don't remember any of that, but apparently I was. And as a result, it took a long time for them to cut me out. So I was down there for an hour and a half.
Gosh. I mean, in a way, what you're saying is that there is a limit of suffering that we all have. But maybe if we're really pushed to the very limits of our suffering and we get to that point, like I'm frightened I'm going to die, of actual physical suffering, of pain, I'm not going to remember. When you get to the edge of that, it then gives you something to jump from. Like, I'm never going to feel that bad again.
Yes.
I mean, in my terms, it's those of us that ignore death and dying that don't give us the opportunity to really embrace life. That if we really know that we're going to die and we have it walking alongside us, we know more than anyone how precious and important just living is, just every day is. And it sounds like you've had that kind of experience.
Yeah, it does. I mean, when you go through something so life-changing, I remember in hospital that I had two choices. I kept asking that question, why me? But then when I realised how many people died that day, I didn't realise how many people died that day until 8 days later. Well, it wasn't actually. It was about 6 weeks after I was strong enough for the first time to go to the gym physio at Royal London. I couldn't even get out of bed before that. And I went up there and I met all these other victims. And I didn't realise that 52 people had died. And
So many. It's terrible.
And so many family that I had
So
met.
many families.
And they cried on my shoulders. And they've said, I met these families and they were like, do you remember my son on the tube? And I wish I could.
Wish you could.
They're trying to fit all these families, all these wives, all these mums and dads, children, trying to fit together what happened those last minutes of their loved one's life.
Terrible. If you think for every person that dies, there's probably, if they're lucky, but most people have 8 to 10 significant people that are bereaved, grandparents, siblings,
and
children, partners, parents.
And I think this is where sometimes families, especially with terrorism, I'm not saying that it's worse than any other thing out there, but it is just the nature of it is shocking. It's so shocking.
Like blue sky.
Yeah.
A summer's day. Yeah. Day after we got the London Olympics.
And it's shocking. And as a result of that, obviously the victim, myself and other victims, find it very hard and hard to get your head round that you've actually been involved in that. But I think the families, your family and friends, again, maybe this is me reflecting on other people and what they've given me, but it is so shocking for them and they can't control things. Yeah, it happens and they couldn't stop it. I mean, suddenly, can you imagine my family not knowing where I was for 2 days and then finally finding me and the whole shock of, she's there. Oh my God, look at the state of her. And
so your family didn't know you were alive for 2 days?
No, they searched for me. They didn't know where I was on the Thursday and then they found me on the Friday night. So they searched all the hospitals because again, because of all the security. I mean, I was saying to Liz, my name is Martine Wright, and Liz gave that information to someone, but because of all the security, heightened security, that information didn't get through. So, I mean, I can't imagine those 36, 48 hours. I can't imagine. I mean, it still upsets me now. And
families who were bereaved, that must be devastating for them too, because they know what that felt like for 36 hours.
Yeah, but actually that could have been stopped. And this is the learnings that that's why I was talking to the government and things like that, because everyone was ringing up the missing helpline. And then when their loved ones did turn up, they weren't ringing them back saying, oh, my daughter's turned up. And as a result, there was everything was out there searching for everyone. And as a result, I mean, my dad used to be a black taxi driver, so he was just going around London, and I'd only been in my job 6 months, so they didn't really know how I got to work.
Tube stop
my company got a private detective out.
Did they?
That day, yeah, in order to find it. It's just ridiculous. DNA taken from my toothbrush.
Wow.
But yeah.
So can we go to the Paralympics? So, I mean, you're an inspirational speaker, rebuilding your life. So from waking that day, discovering that both your legs had been blown off, the next day, not knowing, terrified to sleep because you might die. And then 5 years later, you were...
Seven. Well, 7, that's my lucky number, 7.
Oh, 7
yeah, happened in 2012, and I only worked that out the other day. I'm quite obsessed with 7 now. 7 is my lucky number, as I said. People go, why would you want number 7 when you got blown up on 7-7?
Yeah.
And it was, yes, I know, but I want something positive out of it. But also, as well, Julia, as I said, you've picked up on this already. People are so important to me in my journey. And as a result, that's why I have number 7 on my shirt, my volleyball shirt, in order to never, ever forget those people and the families that I've met of those victims.
So it's to remember them, the 7.
Yeah, of course it is. Because they will always be there. I was so lucky that day. Again, people go, Martine, you nearly lost your life. You lost both your legs. How can you say you were lucky? I was lucky because when I went to that inquest and I saw the map of where people were sitting, I was just 4 foot away from the bomber that day.
Gosh.
And there were people that were killed that were further away. It was like a lottery.
So random. It's
so I
random.
was lucky that day. And I realised I had a choice that day. There were 52 people that didn't have a choice of their life. And I did. So that is why I wear that number on my shirt, because it reminds me that I've got to carry on with life and get the best out of life, because I had that choice. And as I said, there were many people that they didn't.
Body.
So, I suppose that I spent a year in hospital. I spent 366 days in hospital. And then it was time.
In a lot of pain. I mean, there must have been a lot of physical
multiple pain. I mean, it's the pain. And obviously, look, Julia, you know, I was a girl about town one day, and then suddenly I was disabled and amputee in a chair where people were properly staring at me a lot of the time. And I had a very good coping mechanism to deal with that. And I still do that now.
Maybe you can teach me. What is it?
Right. What is it? Is what you do is when you have someone that stares at you, you just stare back at them, but you insistently smile. Okay, so you're staring at me now, and I don't lose your look. I don't lose your stare, and I smile insistently until you smile or until you look away. That is it. I never look away. I will look at their eyes, and I'm all right. I'm on shorter legs than everyone else, all right, but I'm all right.
I'm all right.
And it's that holding that stare.
And you're telling them, what are you telling them?
I'm okay.
Don't look down on me.
Yeah, and I'm not saying don't look, because it's natural to look sometimes, But if I stare back at them insistently and smile, they're either going to smile back, which I love, or they just look away then.
I mean, when I smile right now, of course, my smile's so wonky, my smile might put them off, but who knows?
Exactly, but you can still see you're smiling. You can see your beautiful eyes. Lovely. And so that's what you want to do. You want to stare in people's faces. But I knew that I couldn't go back to the same job that I went before. I know people that did, but I couldn't do that. And I don't think I was strong enough to do that. I knew I had to do something as a result of what had happened, because to me, it would have all been a complete waste of
you had to make
energy, lives, heartache, everything. So I had a lovely physio, Maggie, and we ended up going to a Paralympic potential day where you tried all different sports. Actually started off with wheelchair tennis, but found it quite lonely.
Were you sporty before?
I was sporty at school, sporty at university, but then, as many people in London, the sport I had was my right arm, basically, down the pub. So, and we always used to join gym memberships, but no. So, and I think the irony is that sport re-entered my life when I could have been seen as disabled, less able. There's an irony there. So I'd started sitting volleyball and I fell in love with it. And why did I fall in love with it? It was quite a dynamic game. You don't play in a wheelchair, you play on the floor. I do joke and say it was actually because you move constantly around on the floor on your bums. It was first called Bumble. Thankfully they changed it. And it's an amazing sport. And then suddenly, I had my son. My son Oscar was only 3 months old I started.
Was it the boyfriend? Did you have the boyfriend before the accident?
Yes. Nick is, he was my boyfriend. Then he was my husband. And then most recently, he's not my husband. We're best friends, but we've decided to live in different houses. So that's another challenge.
There's a whole story going on.
I've been through. That's a whole story. That might have to be another interview. But he's such a huge part of my life and will always be. And we see each other pretty much every day anyway. So we may not live together, but we're still a family. But
can I ask you one question? Was your relationship, or where you are now, living in separate houses, impacted by your disability?
Oh, well, absolutely. Our relationship has been through, this is why I think our relationship is so unique and so special, actually, because we have been through so many changes, so many ups and downs. And yeah, it was, I mean, only 3 months before it had all happened, we'd only just got back together again. We'd only been through together for a year and a half. And we split up for 3 months, then literally got back together in the Easter, and then I got blown up in the July. And Nick is a beautiful, beautiful man and is very kind. And again, I don't
It's a
know,
big
maybe
thing
that
for
happened for a
him.
reason. Maybe that happened for a reason for him to be there for me and for me to be there for him as well. I mean, I think I've given him the confidence to go off and do different things and different jobs and different education. And he's given me the confidence to put myself back together again and carry on. So,
And have a
yeah, I mean,
baby.
there's always a way. Julia, we'll be doing stuff in a slightly different way. It might take a little bit longer than
Require
other
a bit more
people,
patience.
but there is a way.
So you haven't really answered my question about Nick, whether your disability
It,
has impacted in the separation because it's an extra pressure on
no,
no.
no, my disability has not been anything to do with my separation. We're both very different people. I think that has given our son a beautiful personality because we are both very different people, and we've been together 20 years. And like many
That's a
people,
good
we're
relationship.
slightly
Yeah.
different people now. But we've only split up because we know that we're always going to be part of each other's lives. And that's it. We have Christmas together. We do all
Family.
those things together. It's about people in your life and what time they come in your life. And maybe they exit your life at a certain time. I've lost loved ones that, again, got me through. One of my best friends died 2 years before I got blown up.
I remember.
A terrible accident. And that's what sometimes got me through. That thing of Emma's up there.
Yeah.
She ain't got a choice. So I've got to get on with it. And I think that's what people bring you in different parts of your life.
Yeah.
And hopefully you're lucky enough to have them for your whole life.
Yeah.
But I believe it's about sharing. And maybe that's why I talk so much.
Reciprocity.
Yeah.
I think you've got a lot to say and you've got a lot of energy. I mean, I can see in your chair, it's like you have the energy of 10 men. So I imagine the frustration of, I mean, I know you've got false legs that enable you to walk, but
Yeah.
the energy not being able to use it all the time because of your disability must be incredibly frustration. You must have found a whole source.
Slightly more bossy, Julia. I think I've got to that. I mean, I think I was bossy. Yeah, it's to do with, I probably do get frustrated sometimes. I don't feel frustrated, but I've always been animated. I've always been like this, apparently. My friends used to liken me to Animal out of the Muppet Show. Yeah. So the drummer. And I suppose I am slightly more bossy, but I just feel like I just like to be in control. Yeah. And I know if I have to do that, I sometimes have to do it in a certain way.
So you can do it. You can find your answers.
Yeah. So, and that's what life is about. It's about adapting. But I do believe that I did join the team. Sorry, I did join the team when Oscar was 3 months old. And that was really hard. That was another hard thing of feeling guilty about leaving because I was away for quite a lot and things like that. And then 2 years later, I got selected and was performing in my London hometown. And to go back and do that was one of the best things, best moments of this journey that we're talking about. Because I put a GB shirt on, not because of that, but because I have a photo that's in my hallway that is my most favourite photo of the Paralympics. And people go, but you're not in it. I'm like, no, I know I'm not in it. But my team me. I believe all of us have a team me. And that's my family, my friends and people that have been there for me. And I remember coming out of this tunnel in Excel Arena in front of thousands of people, and the noise was mad in London. And I came out and I looked left and I saw my family with these banners. And I knew that all the blood, sweat and tears had all been worth it. But I knew, and Oscar was sitting on Nick's head with a flag. And it was an opportunity to say, look what we've done.
Yeah.
I,
Look how we've grown.
yeah, 7 years ago, I ran from London because I was scared. Yeah, I lost my legs. I lost my love for London. We're all Londoners. We're Bow Cockneys. We love it.
Mm.
And to go back to London to say, I've not done this. We've done this.
Yeah.
And I'm okay.
So that was a moment where you'd really transformed the devastation into something that was
absolutely
kind of surreally extraordinary, really.
It is surreally extraordinary. And I try and think this journey has been so amazing that is it just coincidences or is it fate? Was it my fate? And I think you spoke about in the beginning about what got me through. And in the beginning, I sometimes gave it that belief of
Fate.
I was always meant to make this journey because it's better to accept. So I couldn't have done anything about it. It's done. But as I was doing that, then more coincidences would happen. So, for instance, Oscar was due to be born on the 7th of July in 2009.
Oh my God.
Can't make that one up. He wasn't. He was late, so it was the 16th of July. Where I trained at Roehampton University before the Paralympics with the sitting volleyball team was literally facing my hospital. I looked out of the door, out of the hall, and I could see my hospital bed. Can't make that up. It just all those the people I've met again, the people I've met, and I know
together, don't they?
But I don't know whether it's all coincidence, but I put it together and I say I was always meant to be this journey, and I do believe that, and it's given me so much strength because it's that acceptance, it's that things have happened.
You look like you're on fire with energy. It's given you so much life in your body, hasn't it? Perfect. Can you go on the tube? Do you mind if Oscar goes on the tube?
No, I have. It took me 10 years. Me and Nick were off to Wimbledon for the first time. We got tickets. That was nice. And we were at Westbourne Grove, the overground, sort of underground. And I said, look, come on. It's time for me to get on a tube. And I got off. And actually, I got on this tube at Westbourne Grove and it was going to the same destination as it was that day.
Oh, my God.
It was a circle, the Green Line, District Line, yeah. And I had a picture, which the front of it was going to the same destination. And I got on it, and a mixture of emotions, really. Obviously, the doors opened, and I looked immediately at the corner seat that I was sat at. And then we went into a tunnel, and then I started getting nervous a bit. And so, but I got off, and I did it. And then since then, I've been 4 or 5 times now on the Northern Line, but you do have to pick and choose where you get on and off, because you end up in the London Transport Network all day trying to find a lift or something. I go on trains.
Because there's so terrible access for you with your wheelchair.
It's terrible, and it angers me, Julia. It's a bit like lovely Tanny Gray Thompson. She's a campaigner, but come on. They're talking about these new trains. I go on trains now. I live in Tree, so it goes down to Euston. And they are more, but I still can't. You'll need to ring up and get a ramp or whatever. And they're talking about these deliveries of these new trains. It's like, what deliveries? Oh, they got a little ramp that comes out. So easy, just a shit. And it will just drop however high the platform is. No. That
doesn't make any sense. So, Martine, we're sort of coming to the end of our conversation. So for people listening, you are who you are, and you're obviously born with the glass half full. And you have found a way of making the most and transforming the worst possible event into something that has given you glimmers and changing other people's lives in the process of changing your own. What would you tell people listening who aren't necessarily born with that optimism? How could you help them? What could you say?
I think it's about being realistic sometimes as well. I can pretty much guarantee that we're all going to go through a sad time, a difficult time. And whether that is immediately about us or whether it is a loved one, someone in our team, we're going to go through that. And I think sometimes it's like our mental well-being now. 4 years after COVID or whatever it is, we're all more aware of our mental well-being. I love it. And we're more aware of other people's mental well-being because we realise that we're all different. I think we have a more realisation now as a result of what we've all been through in this world. the last few years is that we are all different. So I believe that we all have different coping mechanisms, but it sounds really cheesy, but it's a journey. Life is a journey, and that's what our mental well-being is about as well. And so all of us, I don't still have rubbish days, all of us.
Yeah.
But I believe that if we know more about each other, if we know more about ourselves, I know my coping mechanisms. I like to go and take my dog for a walk sometimes and get out there or meet a friend, go off and have a chat. But I believe that we all have more coping mechanisms. The beauty of what COVID brought us as well, I believe, is that we're more aware of other people's and what we need to do to support people. But
To broaden
don't
our
give yourself a
team
hard
me,
time. Yeah, don't give yourself a
them.
hard time. Things are going to go up and down in life. And I promise you, whatever you go through, if you find it's the worst day that you've ever experienced, it will get better.
It changes.
It will get better. And you will get, it won't just get better, you will get amazing things from it. And I know that's so easy for me to say. And it sounds condescending. If someone's going through something, I mentor people now. I have a chat with people that have lost limbs, and you don't believe that in the beginning. Obviously, you don't believe that. Why would I believe that? Yeah. But as I said, there are so many amazing things from it. You do have to go out and look for them, or sometimes they'll come from other people that you'll meet on your journey as a result of what happens. Special people will give you that strength to carry on. So we all
it's
go
having
through
hope, isn't it? Hope is.
It is.
This question I've got, and you've been wonderful, Martine. It's lovely to meet you. Is one of the most annoying things, but maybe can be true, is when people talk about time. So given that it's 19 years since the crash, and people say time is a great healer, when you look across those 19 years, has your relationship with what happened, how is your relationship with time? Like, does it feel like yesterday and 100 years ago?
I suppose there's lots of people that are going to be listening to this that have been through something, and it's quite hard to describe, isn't it? Sometimes it's like, I feel like this is me now. This is me. Yeah. Physically, emotionally, this is me. 19 years, 20 years ago, of someone else. So I feel like time has moved on because I now accept myself for who I am. This is me. This is normal. There was a time where I didn't accept, especially my physical look, my body image and everything.
Looking in the mirror must have been hard for a while.
Oh, there's a bit in my book. I mean, I'm lucky enough to write my own book, Unbroken. Yeah. And yeah, I remember that in hospital. It was, I literally were just in my room, pulling the light on and off, just not. I mean, the first month, I couldn't look at myself. I didn't look at myself at all the first month. And then when I looked at myself, I realised I had blood permanently in my whites of my eyes, still a month on. But then again, there are times when I just count myself lucky. That's why I think about terrible memories. I did have PTSD after it. I don't have that now. I got fantastic support, again, psychological support and things like that. So in a way, it does feel like 20 years ago. In a way, it seems like that memory of me running up that escalator to that tube. But I know things have moved on. And again, I wouldn't go back, and I wouldn't be the person or have the life that I had before. And luckily, Julia, I've always quite liked talking. And so now I feel like I've got a duty to talk about it.
There's a Jewish saying that if you change one life, you change the world. And I think you're also saying is that when you don't fight what's happened to you, but find a way of living with it and having life in your life, given what has happened to you, and building your life despite what's happened to you, then that is where you get growth and happiness. That if you fight it, it wrestles you to the ground, not the other way around.
I like that.
It's good.
Someone gave me a quote the other day, and it was amazing. So this lady wrote this on a piece of paper, and she just popped it in my pocket at the end. And she said, "This is for you." And she said, "The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away."
Oh,
Pablo Picasso.
what a wonderful.
Is it?
The meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away.
To give it away. Isn't that lovely?
That's so
Well, Julia, it has been lovely talking to you for an hour.
Lovely talking to you. Where can people find you so that they can be inspired?
Well, I need a bit of a kick when we're talking about social media, but they can find me on Instagram, they can find me on Twitter, they can find my book, Unbroken. I'm just about to bring that out in paperback. It's only actually ever been in hardback. So that should be out soon. And martinewright.co.uk.
Perfect. Your website.
But you probably hear me before you see me, Julia, won't you, really? I think everyone would do.
Thank you, Martine. It's a really delight to meet you. Sophie and Emily, lovely to see you and to talk about Martine. I mean, I remember the 7th of the 7th so clearly. It was...
Me too. I was in London.
Yeah, me too.
And hearing the news, and I was in the kitchen at home and just immediately thinking, where were all of you and were you all okay? How one kind of immediately goes to one's sort of nearest and dearest. And I guess the thing that comes to mind first is that sliding doors thing, those moments, like if she hadn't gone out late, if she hadn't slept in because of her alarm. It's just so random, these events can be so utterly devastating that are completely beyond our control.
Yes, but I think the other sort of big piece of that I really got from Martine, who was such a pleasure to listen to, was the importance of meaning making as being so essential to resilience. So the narrative that Martine has created around her experiences, not easily, I'm sure not in a straight line, not without a lot of pain and mess and grief, but the meaning that she's made of it has allowed her to sort of not feel like that, not be a victim. Not be a victim, to sort of say, like, actually, I wouldn't go back and change things because of what has happened since then, that almost that sliding doors thing that actually, no, this was meant to be for me. This is what I was meant to do with my life. And it's an extraordinary thing to be able to kind of, like you say, Mum, the sort of so much of your life is the story you tell yourself. Of your life, and the story she has created around the sort of gift of it and the meaning she's made from it, and then the connections that she's made and the richness and the giving and the generosity that she's taken from it was a really extraordinary thing to listen to. But it also sort of made me think that no one can do that for you, right? You can't sort of be pushed to be like, oh, well, look on the bright side of things.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. Like it made me think too of, it might be a bit of a tangent, but not thinking so much of trauma, but thinking of kind of just typically challenging things that happen to most people, and thinking of sort of parenting, like when something happens to your child and they're really devastated, like it might be like not getting the main part in the school play, or
failing their exam,
or a friend suddenly deciding that they don't want to be their friend anymore, like all these things that are really, really hard, but also what you would expect to happen in the course of life. And I think sometimes as parents, we want to push our children to kind of look on the bright side, like create a narrative that's like giving you an opportunity to make some new friends if you haven't got that friend anymore. And I think that doesn't really work, because I think that just sort of invalidates the experience. So I think the meaning making kind of has to come from yourself. If you are trying to push it on somebody else, whether that's a partner, a child, whoever, it's just experienced as quite invalidating, I think.
Yes, and I guess the sort of central thing that comes up from listening to Martine, who is so, like, her energy is just like, isn't it? You feel it, very warm and alive and energetic, is the question of like, how was she able to do that? How was she able to be that resilient in the face of something that most of us think about for ourselves and feel like, oh, I don't think I would have been able to respond the way she has. And she talks about, in a way, all the different aspects. There's the meaning making that you've already talked about. It's also the sense of, as we know from research, that the amount of support you have at the time of a traumatic event is the most significant factor of whether you develop PTSD and what your outcome is, your mental health outcome. And you could hear her support. Her family were there.
Daughter,
she felt them. The things they said to her were things that she then like fully took in, and they were a big part of what helped her be like, oh, I'm the one who could meet this out of us. But there's also that bit, right, is that her siblings felt like, oh, I don't think we could have survived this the way you have. There's also just luck, what you were born with. She was saying, no,
right?
personality. Like before this happened to me, I was still this kind of person, right? Like energetically, I was this kind of person, and I met it in a way that I met lots of other things. And that, all of that is in there, isn't it?
Cocktail.
This cocktail of like, why do we respond the way we do?
And I think the other part of the cocktail is the perspective. So when her best friend died, which is actually similar to Greg Wise's experience, having lost a young friend, perspective of recognizing the devastation of someone dying young, and I think created a landscape in her that shifted her perspective, that she could hold on to the value of being alive in a way. I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I wonder with all of us, when we change our perspective, we change our feeling in our relationship with what's happened to us. And I felt like that might have been an influence.
Yeah, but I mean, I think sort of similarly, a different person could have said, like, what the hell? My best friend died and then this happened. Am I cursed? Like, why do all these terrible things happen
to me? Double down on the bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a billion different ways you can experience the same event.
The other thing that I don't know that she speaks to a lot, unless some of you picked up on something that I didn't, but she talks about not feeling anger, not holding on to resentment at the bombers of 7/7. And that's another intriguing kind of how she managed not to get caught in that kind of stuck in that loop of anger
and blame,
which seems to be related to the embracing of her situation. I think we're often stuck, that thing of resentment, isn't it? And anger, and is a very past, present, future experience. If you're okay in your present and you feel hopeful of your future, it is much easier to let go of the people who have hurt you in your past. If you're in a place in your present or potential future that feels very bleak, then we ruminate. We go back, don't we, and go, well, if this hadn't happened, or if they hadn't done that, or if only this and that. Those things are much easier to let go of if we feel accepting of how things are. There's a sort of relationship, isn't there? It's not as whether you do or don't choose to.
You're more adaptive.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that really struck me was the parts where she got most emotional was not to do with like anything to do with the physical pain or actually anything to do with her own experience, but it was to do with the kindness of others, like that experience of somebody else being kind. And when we are vulnerable, actually someone else being kind could be completely life-changing. And her experience was obviously this huge, enormous courage and kindness in this very, very intense, extreme situation. But actually, I think small kindnesses can really be life-changing, or they sort of stick with you, don't they? Like
the nurse, wasn't there a nurse, or the ambulance man?
Yes, and the woman Liz, was it Liz, who sat with her? Yeah, that sort of kindness was just that sort of holding on forever. And I definitely have had experiences where somebody has done something, like I had this very minor routine medical procedure relatively recently, and it was just difficult because it's sort of linked to other things that I've experienced that made what was a sort of routine thing actually quite an emotional, difficult thing. And she didn't know that. The nurse that did the procedure had no idea of that. I just turned up and went into the appointment. But she was so incredibly empathic, and she just sort of kept saying, oh, like, I know this isn't very nice, or are you doing okay? You're doing great. I know, oh, this is... And it just honestly completely transformed my experience of that procedure. And she could have just been like, wham, bam, let's get this done. I've got another patient. So like these sort of things of kindness, they really,
humanity, aren't they?
Humanity, they sort of hit you. And she had no idea of how meaningful that was to me. And I listened to the Moth podcast, which is really good. It's a storytelling podcast. And there was a man on there who was talking about his experience of being in prison. And he went out of the prison to have a also actually weirdly a medical procedure, and he was having a thing which meant that there was something being stuck on his chest, and when it was sort of pulled off, it like pulled off the hair on his chest. And he said sort of firstly, sort of a very intense experience of like no one had touched him for like however long he'd been in prison. So then the physical touch. And then when the nurse did the thing where she pulled off and it had to pull off his chest hair, she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And he suddenly was like, "Oh, like I'm a human." I am a human. And suddenly this person has reminded me that I am a human being.
Worthy of care.
Worthy of care. I think it's the intense power of the kindness of others, I think, that struck me.
And often it's not recognised, and because you're in too much of a state at the time to say anything, and you wish you could go back and give them a hug and say thank you.
Yes, and often that person wouldn't have even known that, like, how much effect it could have.
I remember writing after my second birth. I had a very traumatic first birth and then not second, and writing this like gushing letter to my midwife afterwards, being like, "Dear Clodagh," because it was so.
It felt like a love letter. Yeah.
Because to have felt cared for and really held in mind in a moment of intense vulnerability is profound. And whether or not they know they're doing it or not. And I guess it's speaking about the profound, but I also think sometimes it's, my husband tells the story that his mum used to say to him not to put his feet on the chairs on tubes because she said, and trains, because you never know, someone in their wedding dress might come and sit on that chair. You don't want to be the person which obviously totally absurd. Like, why are the wedding dress on the train? Unlikely. But the thing that made me think of it was something about the orientation in the world of kindness, of not knowing that the sort of impact that thoughtfulness, if you carry that around, of like, no one really knows what suffering the person you're sitting next to is going through, and that's good to hold in mind.
The other thing I think that often doesn't get acknowledged is the impact on the whole family and the family system. The other thing I thought that often doesn't get acknowledged enough by clients when they're suffering or something terrible has happened, and I think and isn't enough acknowledged in the kind of psychological world, is the impact of the trauma of an individual on the whole family system. How everybody suffers, and yet often they have to, or they do, try and diminish for themselves what they're feeling, because they feel like in order to be a good daughter or partner or sibling, they have to focus on the person that's ill, and they have to kind of dismiss their own experience of the shock, the trauma, how they don't feel so safe in the world, and the worry that they feel, and that the whole family gets kind of tilted off kilter to focus on the person that has had the diagnosis, if it's cancer or a terrible accident or whatever it is.
And there can be like a sort of like you can feel like there's a hierarchy of what you're allowed to feel. Like if you're not the person, or you're not really close to the person, well, I mean, I sort of shouldn't be so upset because they seem to be coping okay. So if they're coping okay and they're closer, or they are the person, then somehow I shouldn't be not coping. Like I think there's a sense of like, how valid are my feelings?
And I also think there can be a co-protection. So, I mean, I don't know if this is true of Martine, but just to take it out generally, where the person who's suffering, who's ill, kind of says, I'm fine, so that they don't upset the rest of the family. And the family member said, I'm fine. And then there's this huge gap of connection where everyone's putting on this armor and protection, and they're not kind of being open and honest. And I think it's true what you're saying about a hierarchy. And I think what is much more useful is to have honest and open communication between everybody, that there isn't one that is more valid than another, and that the more open and honest people can be, that in some ways that does release them to feel calmer and more connected to each other, rather than hyper and having to perform, as it were.
And sometimes it can give permission. Like when you have, a family member who's dying and no one has talked about dying, and the person who's dying hasn't talked about it, sometimes by being the person who's saying, like, this is what I'm worried about, or these are my fears, you open the door to say, like, we actually can talk about these things, and you can tell me your fears. And
that you don't die by saying it. No one does.
Yeah, although the only thing I would add to that is that sometimes, is that really, when really big traumatic things happen, we do need other people outside of our it's not that we don't need to communicate, we do, but sometimes people are not able to hold each other very well because of how emotional they are, or their capacity is truly is limited. And often those communications can go better if you are also being held yourself by your own team of friends, partners, that really those if you've been hit like that as a family, what you want to see is like the community holding them, right? The web of people. You don't necessarily know who everyone is these days about how the community works, but in an ideal world, there's a constellation of support, and that every person has their little team behind them. And I think often, and this is sort of gender stereotyping here, but I think often women have other women to speak to, not always, but I think men can particularly struggle in those moments because they often don't have men in their life that they already speak to openly about difficult stuff. And it might be up to that point, nothing so difficult recent in their adult life has come along that has been presented as such an immediate challenge. And then at that point that they need it, they don't have it.
It's also where the internet is a beautiful thing. And I think connecting with people who've been through the same thing as you can be incredibly helpful. Like if you, because it can, it can feel really difficult. Like nobody could understand this experience except for other people who have been through this or something really similar. And I think those can be very powerful experiences of finding people who have experienced something comparable.
Martine spoke to that, didn't she?
Yeah.
She spoke to this community of other people that she loved, how great they are, and they're her best people who are also there on 7/7.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you, Martine, for really teaching us about resilience and courage in the face of extreme experiences and tragedy. And thank you, Emily and Sophie, and all of you that are listening. We so value you downloading and listening to the podcast. And we also value if you can share it with other people. And if you have questions about this that have come up for you for Agony Aunties, do let us know through the DMs in my Instagram. And thank you.